Uh, Colleagues, good evening, good afternoon, and good morning to all of you. Honorable Minister, Mr. M.M. Annan, I think he is the perfect public leader at this moment and a most suitable chief guest for the occasion. The Honorable Chair of the session, Professor Atikul Islam, Vice Chancellor of the North-South University, another very kind host. And I have been pleased to listen to Dr. Angel Wright Lanier, Professor Errol D'Souza, and of course, Mr. Azimuddin Ahmed, the chair of the Board of Trustees of North-South University. And I would also like to recognize the presence of all the colleagues from the North-South University. It is Mr. Salahuddin Aminuzzaman who persuaded me to be here today, but I also see many of the friendly faces. That's good to see on a Friday morning, which is a weekend in Dhaka at this moment. And I see that we are already working overtime in the post-pandemic era. That's very encouraging. When I was asked to talk about this, provide an inaugural speech to this session, which is essentially a multi-country, cross-disciplinary gathering, I wondered what to talk about. But then I thought that this would be an occasion for me, based on the work I had been doing for the last 2 years on the impact of COVID in Bangladesh and also in Global South, to have a closer look at the South Asian experience. But the experience is quite varied and it is quite rich in many ways from the policy perspective, particularly for the public leaders. And here, Mr. Chair, Honorable Minister, the public leader for me is that, of course, the public representatives to start with, the various kinds of, starting from the local government to the members of parliament, but also the officials who exercise executive power. And at the same time, I also consider there are public leaders as non-state actors, which are from the civil society as the public and also the policy analysts, experts, and scholars. So I do take a broader view about the public leaders in these cases, and they have a different types of constituency and different types of roles to dispense with, but they're all mutually complementary, and together we make a good country in many ways. So it's my unique privilege to address such a gathering with a set of general observation based on the empirics of the last 2 years. The point is that when I tried to generalize these lessons, I was reminded of one of the sayings of my great-grandmother. She said that never say more than 3 issues because the people will never remember the 4th one. So I wondered how many issues should I take there. Then I recalled that this is possibly the most erudite gathering I have ever seen. So maybe they will be able to absorb the double the normal average. So I came to you with 6 lessons instead of 3. So excuse me for that. So Najiba, let's go to the panels, to the PowerPoint now. And I take this opportunity, of course, to thank the NASPAA for the South Asia conference and to invite me. I see the South Asian Institute of Policy and Governance of the North-South University, as well as the Jindal School of Public Policy at the IIM Ahmedabad together in this exercise, and I want to congratulate them. So let's set the scene first. So set the scene. Incidence, the minister has already alluded to some of the issues. Let me put it the numbers. I have put before you 2 tables here on the incidence of infection and the vaccine coverage. And they're in comparable to put them. The first one on the incidence rate, you will see in terms of percentages and the per 100,000 population, or the vaccination also percentage of the fully vaccinated in the South Asian countries. Have a look among the countries. If you see the least affected or possibly the most managed incidence of infection had been Bhutan. It's only 0.3%, and the death rate was 0.4%. To what extent it was because it was a landlocked country and the infection did not spread very much, or to what extent it was the public policy which was gave that kind of fantastic result, it is to be seen. But if you look at the countries, which was also very isolated country, like Maldives, the incidence was much more higher. So the logic of isolation, to what extent it occurs, is to be seen. And the death rates was much, much higher, possibly one of the highest, followed by Sri Lanka. So you see that Sri Lanka and Maldives are the two outliers in terms of infection rates now within South Asia. And Bhutan obviously scores the best. And all other countries, and I won't really talk about Afghanistan because it is totally an aberration currently. And so you will see India, Bangladesh, Nepal, Pakistan will somewhere fall in between. So when Mr. Mannan, the Honorable Minister, says we are moderately managed, he is perfectly correct, because we are somewhere in between Bhutan and on the other extreme, Maldives and Sri Lanka. So the other interesting part is that, is there a connection between the infection rate and the death rate and the rate of vaccination? Here again, very interestingly, Bhutan tops the whole score. Please keep on the other one, then I will come to this. So you see this, the Bhutan vaccination rate is 72 points, almost 73%. And interestingly, Maldives with the high vaccination rate still had the highest death rate. So here we need to look into beyond vaccination, what are the other factors which could have really led to this kind of situation in Maldives, or for that matter in Sri Lanka, because Sri Lanka also had a high vaccination rate. But here, how the vaccination was rolled out, it is also an issue, that it is that how not at the beginning, maybe towards the end. So let's put the next one, the scatter diagram. In this scatter diagram, I tried to compare the infection rates and the death rates against the vaccination. Infection rate and the vaccination coverage. You will see Bhutan comes out on the top, which essentially means higher the vaccination, lower the infection rate. But we also have Maldives on the other extreme, where you will see higher vaccination, but also higher vaccination and higher death rate. So Bhutan on the one extreme with the high vaccination and low death rate, and Maldives with the higher vaccination, high death rate. And you see Afghanistan at the bottom, that you have low vaccination and high death rate in this case. And you will see in the scatter diagram, India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, they're in the middle on the side, as you will see. So that's a very interesting relationship or an association. Statistician will contest me if I say relationship, and I am not implying any causality here, but I'm just showing you the relationship over here. Let's move to the next one. So lesson number one. What is the lesson number one? Public policies actors need to remember that nowadays all national issues are global anyway. There is hardly any national issue which doesn't have a global dimension. And COVID is a classical case in point. The cross-border dimensions of COVID-19, I mentioned only 5, could have gone more. One is the virus spreading. It started in one country possibly, and it came to all over the world. You access to vaccine, whether it is a gift or a purchase or through the COVAX, it has the global dimension. The world is now rife with the discussion of vaccine politics, both in manufacturing and distribution. The third is the global travel shutdown. That is the movement of people. It was affected both with the coming and outing. And supply chain disruption, movement of food, not food, sorry. It is the goods and services. Well, not all goods are food and services. And finally, the closure of the markets and the labor markets. And Bangladesh knows better that because of the migrant workers came back to our countries. So first and foremost lesson for our public leaders, that don't treat a national issue in a circumspect way that it is only national. Always please look at how the global systemic concerns are reflected in our national deliberations in whatever way, whether it's the production of goods, services, or movement of natural people, or we are accessing products, or particularly health-related materials when it concerns COVID-19. That would be my first lesson. Let's move the second one. The second one, which had been already alluded to by this, the opening speakers, The socio-economic impact of the pandemic disproportionately fell on the left behind people. When I said the left behind people, I'm talking about the traditionally disadvantaged people. In my earlier study, I have tried to identify who are the disadvantaged people. It is in case of Bangladesh or for the global south, coming from the point of view of their vulnerability. And you see this point of view, the vulnerability of these disadvantaged people. This includes the life cycle phenomena, whether they are senior citizens or they are young children. It includes the locational phenomena, whether they are remotely located people without proper access, connectivity, starting from multimodal transport system to internet and others. It may be also related to occupations, when the occupations are quite often hazardous or underpaid, low skill, low productivity, and others. It may come from the income level. They are by nature low income earning people. And it may come from gender, women in particular, transgender, the others, but also comes with the low level of education, physical disability, and most importantly, civil identity, ethnic, religious minorities, and many other issues. So the interesting part is that whereas the whole country was affected, but some people were more affected than the others. What is important also in this respect that to note that whilst there had been this left behind people in our countries, but then this pandemic has pushed behind some people, those who had not been the traditionally disadvantaged group. Who are these people? We identify through our studies that's pushed those people who have been pushed behind. They're essentially the low middle income people who have been disengaged from their regular source of income and did not have social protection means and were not privy to the government support system in these cases. So the second lesson is that whilst we deal with the effect, but we need to take a disaggregated look at where there are some people who were more affected than the others. These people who had been more affected than the others, had there been opportunity, I would have shown, they may vary from country to country. In some countries, it may be the remotely located people. On the other country, it may be the migrant workers. In other cases, it may be the physically challenged people located in remote places or in unaccounted families. Interestingly, these vulnerabilities do not come alone. There is multiple vulnerability, and we also see overlapping vulnerability in these cases when we look at this left behind people disproportionately affected by this pandemic. Lesson number 3. The lesson number 3, let me go to the next slide. The public policy, which was engineered in response to the pandemic, most of the governments across South Asia did have stimulus packages rolled out at very early stage. So you will see that most of these government generated or designed their stimulus package, and they were trying to reach out to the affected people in this case. Now, the point I make here, the ability to roll out a stimulus package is dependent on the fiscal space available to each of these countries. So fiscal space would mean that the government's ability to spend income or its resources or its revenues, or it's borrowed, it can be its own or be borrowed for these emergency programs. Now, I have, as an economist, very faithfully, I have put together a macroeconomic table. So where you see the public expenditure share of the GDP, the revenue share of the GDP, and the fiscal deficit of the GDP as a share of GDP for these respective 7 countries. And do have a look, and you'll see that in a very peculiar way, Afghanistan has, of course, 27% higher at percentage of GDP as Bhutan has the. I won't talk about Afghanistan because it confuses the picture, because there's money, what you see is essentially foreign money. The Bhutan has the highest, public expenditure ratio, 27%. And its revenue ratio is also highest amongst the South Asian countries. And it has the lowest fiscal deficit as well. And if you look at the stimulus packages table on the right side, the size of the stimulus package as a share of GDP, you will see that Bhutan rolled out the single largest share of GDP in terms of the stimulus package, almost 18%. The point I make is that there is a high association between your ability to collect revenue, your ability to spend those good money, and maintain a low fiscal balance, deficit, good fiscal balance, would have allowed us, the respective countries, to spend more for stimulus packages. And you'll see that it is true for Bhutan. It is also partly true for India, because this, India is showing the second lowest fiscal deficit. It's a federal deficit we are talking about, the central deficit, because India is a federal state, it has other issues. So that association is quite clear. And if you see Pakistan, possibly with the highest fiscal deficit, almost 9% of the GDP, had the lowest fiscal stimulus package rolled out. I'm dealing with a number which relates to May 2020. So there may be others, and it is essentially during the first phase of the COVID. So that's I think, a caveat I need to mention. So that is my third issue, that the public expenditure system, or the public finance management system, had a critical role to play in terms of defining the package, this magnitude of the package which we rolled out in our respective countries. I want to dwell with this issue a bit more. Please move. So you see the association. It is the lower axis on the horizontal axis is negative, so it is on the left side. And you will see that Bhutan again shows up on the top with the high association between fiscal deficit and size of the stimulus package in this case. And Pakistan on the other extreme, you will see with the high fiscal deficit and low stimulus package in this case. Again, I am not implying any causality here. I am only showing the association of two sets of numbers. I do not have adequate numbers to run a regression and find out the level, the robustness of this association. Maybe someday we will do that. Let's move on to this public policy rolled out to combat with the pandemic fallouts. Next one. So the fourth lesson coming from the public policy is that absence of most of these countries do not have, I think not most, all the countries do not have universal social protection scheme. And since it did not have social protection scheme, even with those public policy interventions, with the government stimulus packages, this has left people, citizens, communities vulnerable to the pandemic. So it did not really sort out its problem in many ways. So what is the situation? But we do not. All these countries, while they do not have universal social protection scheme, or it may not have basic minimum income, or universal pension scheme, they do have some kind of social safety net programs in different countries in different forms. So in the lower table, you will see that I put what share of the populations have been covered by different types of social protection scheme or safety nets, whether it's children or the mothers, or whether it's unemployment, which is absent, work-related injury, disability, old age pensions, contribution to pension fund, and other vulnerabilities. But look at the numbers in terms of the coverages of social protections in South Asian countries. Very interestingly, on the top of it is Sri Lanka, followed by Bangladesh. Sri Lanka has 36% coverage, Bangladesh has more than 24% of the person coverage, and India 24%. So it is very interesting to relate now the social protection schemes to the fiscal deficit situation and to the infection and the mortality rate or vaccination. We see Sri Lanka, notwithstanding its good social protection and its medium type of fiscal deficit, still managed to get more people in a vulnerable situation and died over there. But they could really pick up sooner in terms of vaccination. So, but at the same time, if you look at those who are in the middle, it is India and Bangladesh. They have really held the situation at a moderate level from the very beginning and thereafter. And also the Maldives with its relative and Nepal with its low over there. So it's a mixed picture, I must say. It's a mixed picture that to what extent the social, the safety net programs were effective in terms of giving protection to these people, vulnerable people, left behind people, and to what extent it was related to vaccination and rolling out of the stimulus package over there. But the point I make, that absence of a universal social protection really left them a bit vulnerable. What are the overall general critiques about the stimulus packages which were rolled out in all these countries? This is a generalized comment based on the 7 countries, 6 countries. Afghanistan, as I said, is not very much relevant at this moment. The first and foremost is low allocation. The highest allocation, what we saw was 6-8% on that, and the lowest was less than 2 or 3%. These are nowhere near the trillions of dollars spent by the larger countries in Europe and United States of America. So the allocation had been relatively modest. But so the second point is that these allocations had a high credit bias. These were based on more on monetary policy instruments, less on fiscal policy instruments. Fiscal policy would mean direct cash transfer and also food assistance underwritten by the government, free food assistance. If you look at the packages in all these countries, you will see it had been dominated by the subsidized interest rate provided by the government. I call them the hybrid measures because it has the fiscal element, because the government gives the subsidies into the interest rate. So it is quasi-fiscal in certain ways, but there are also the other credit. And we know the problem with the credit because these are the poorest of the poor. They do not have access to banking system and many others. And the small and medium enterprises could not access the money properly. And the utilization rate is pretty low in these cases. So the lesson is that we need to, in the absence of any social protection scheme, universal social protection scheme, we need to have more direct cash transfers and food assistance in this case. The other problem was that it missed out the new poor. It talked about whatever support mechanisms were given out, it was directed to the traditional poor and the vulnerables. Whereas the new middle class, which lost their job, particularly the informal sector workers and entrepreneurs, and those who had been in the service sector because of the lockdown, lost their jobs, and had a decent living till the pandemic came in, they were the new vulnerables in all the countries, as we know. There was exclusion and duplication of targets because some of the poor people got more than once, no doubt about that. And then there were others, exclusion in the sense, if they were not listed and if the local governments did not properly work, the central government did allocate, but it may not have reached them in certain cases. So the exclusion and duplication issue is quite critical. And I will relate this exclusion and duplication issue to the absence of data support. Because in order to identify these people and to give them the proper support, we would need their number, their address, their telephone numbers, and NIDs. I have written elsewhere the data innovation which has gone on in Bangladesh, which is tremendous, starting from I will come to that, one of my lessons on the data issue. And that had been the inadequate data support had been a major hindrance in this case. And my last comment is that the low attention during second wave. The first wave got quite a lot of attention. And you will see the rollout of the supports and etc. had been tremendous in the cases. In case of Bangladesh, our first incidents were located on 8th of March, and by 14th and 15th of March, the government was rolling out, and the Prime Minister gave a very substantive guidance in terms of on 4 points how the support mechanism would be, where public expenditure figured, where the direct support figured, where the support to the private sector figured, and also pushing in more liquidity into the system, which was there. But we see the waning of the attention in the second wave, and I wonder if there is a third wave, whether we will make business as usual or not. Fifth lesson. The fifth lesson is the pandemic has spurred data innovation. This is the positive side of the thing. Here I mentioned Bangladesh. The Shurakha Act is a fantastic thing, which unthinkably has really organized the portal, organized the the registration, administration of doses, the management of the vaccination doses, and generated real-time data. If anybody who have told us 3 years back that Bangladeshis with its level of IT literacy would be using Shurakha app to get their vaccination, I think cynical people like me would have laughed away. But today, I think we need to swallow our words and smiles, and we have to accept that it has proven to be quite good. It was not only in Bangladesh. Look at Bhutan vaccine system, BVS. It also did all these monitoring, stock, registration, vaccination certificates, and real-time reports. If you look at India, the COVID vaccine intelligent work, CoWIN as it is called, is the same. It's a cloud-based one. And you look at Pakistan, the National Immunization Management System, NIMS, and you look at Sri Lanka, the District Health Information Software 2, DIHS. So in all the South Asian countries, the pandemic has pushed forward the the awareness about data, the ability to master the local technologies or local expertise to prepare this kind of soft apps and do data management and etc. etc. It is far from perfect. It's far from perfect, but I think we need to give credit to our colleagues for this kind of thing, and also the public leaders for rising up to the occasion, up to a point, in recognizing the importance of data in this case. And this is beyond our national statistical agencies which are going to do that. It is now a challenge in front of us how to create a central data repository with proper safety and security legal protection, and how we do the interoperability, link it to the macro data framework in the BBS. My last lesson over here. My last lesson is that regional cooperation, I mentioned about the global issues, I come to the regional cooperation. Regional cooperation can play a supportive role in dealing with the national issues. The COVID has once again shows us that. But whether in case of Bangladesh it was good enough or not, or in case of other countries good enough or not, I leave it for the posterity to judge. So let me give you some evidence on this. The first, on 15th of March 2020, the Indian Prime Minister convened a meeting of the South Asian countries. All the prime ministers of South Asia, Bangladesh, our prime minister, Bhutan, Nepal, Maldives, and the president of Sri Lanka got into the call. And from Pakistan, it was the state minister who represented Pakistan in that. So that was one of the political initiative very early at this stage the South Asian leaders took. And they took this initiative in the absence of a functioning SAARC mechanism, because SAARC remains in comatose, we all know that. So this was also an initiative. What are the issues over here? On the finance, you see there is a SAARC finance framework back in April 2020, and $2 billion were mobilized under that. And if you see $150 million and $400 million was doled out to Maldives and Sri Lanka. Each of the countries contributed in that to have the liquidity available in this case. So the SAARC finance framework came into existence. Then the leaders put together the SAARC COVID-19 emergency fund. It is $2.8 million. And India was the first one to contribute $10 million out of the 2.18. Bangladesh was the second largest contributor in this case. And then the emergency fund is there. They are supposed to spend this money in their respective areas in this country. The SAARC Development Fund, which is an old one, back in April 2020, it mobilized $5 billion over there. But beyond finance, I think the South Asian cooperation also to be looked into in new areas, new innovation which we have seen. It was unthinkable till the other day that a country like Bangladesh will be extending foreign exchange support to another high middle income country. And that's what Bangladesh did to Sri Lanka. So the Bangladesh, the currency swap with Sri Lanka of 200, now it's going up more than $200 million, is an extraordinary case of regional solidarity and what we have done. So we are redefining the South-South cooperation. In order to be a South-South cooperation provider, you don't need to be very high income economies. You can have opportunities to do more. Medical aid from India to Bangladesh, medical aid from Pakistan to Bangladesh, medical aid from Bangladesh to India. So, and also I would have added that how Bangladesh sold PPE, the personal protection equipments, to America, United States of America. Mr. Pompeo at that time saying that was a great milestone of global international cooperation with a country like Bangladesh providing support to a country like United States of America. So it is not only the data, but also it is a case of how the regional cooperation also took shape in these cases. The vaccine supply from India is a classical case of regional cooperation in this case. Have a look at the numbers. Indian vaccine, the serum, notwithstanding the disruption we had supply from India to Bangladesh, notwithstanding the fact that we had prepaid the supplies we didn't have, nonetheless, you will see the supply situation, how it stands. I have put them in the three heads: the grant, the commercial purchase, and the COVAX, the international COVAX scheme, which gives to low-income countries free vaccines. So you see the highest, in this case, the highest beneficiary of this had been Bangladesh. And of course, the commercial purchase has been the dominant form. It is the 7 million in that way, 3.3 as grant, and then the COVAX. But also you will see in total, this will end up into 15 million doses or something like that. And most of the countries, other than Afghanistan, have had access to the Indian vaccine in many ways. So we had, till the other day, we thought of trade in goods and services, investments, education, but we really didn't see so much of the medical related activities in certain ways. The regional cooperation came out in strongly, but since the borders were closed, the travel were shut down. So there was limits to which you could do regional cooperation. And we have seen later how India has come to Bangladesh with oxygen supply, liquid oxygen and other things through the road transport when it was partially open. But was it enough? I look at the African experience, I don't put, and I show you how they have, in terms of numbers, have done better than ours. Look at the Africa Development Bank initiative, the COVID response facility, $10 billion. The bond social loan is $3 billion. Emergency assistance, which they have given to WHO, the UN system, is $2 million. And you that the joint continental strategy, we didn't have a joint continental strategy. We didn't have a joint regional strategy. Development Bank of Central Africa, $5 million. You see and they have set up new facilities in terms of accessing finance, the emergency credit line, the other things. The Inter-American Bank, the Latin American one, and they bought out $3 billion. So you see the regional joint initiatives, the SADC, the South African Development Procurements, Development Cooperation, and West African Development Bank. The number is almost 200 million. So what I'm trying to say, the South Asia, notwithstanding the fact we do not have a political structure or a functional regional cooperation structure, we did not badly, but it is far away from the other region which have done much better in countries like Africa, Latin America, and elsewhere. So let me now summarize. I think that would be a good thing to do. I will fall back on my grandmother's, great-grandmother's advice, not more than 3 summary points, so that you can take them home. My first and foremost point, that the pandemic has exposed that how poor public health infrastructure we have. The weak public health infrastructure and very limited access to basic needs, because we do not have as I said, fiscal transfer programs beyond the targeted fiscal transfer program for traditional, very poor, ultra poor, or disadvantaged people. And there is no social protection system, universal social protection. We do have safety nets and other things. So this is an issue which we have been for the policy actors, for the minister in particular, that we have been arguing for a universal social protection scheme. And today I also add that it is time to think through for a basic minimum income for all citizens of Bangladesh. I mentioned that to the minister earlier, that whether we could have had this universal social protection scheme dedicated to the 50 years of our independence in Bangladesh, or 100th year of Bangabandhu's birth anniversary. This would have been a perfect tribute. I think we have still the opportunity, think through about it. Basic, and this time to move to basic minimum income. Technical analysis will show to have a basic minimum income, you don't need very high income per capita, although we already have crossed the $2,500 per capita income threshold. My second point is that for the recovery and future growth, the climate issue has been mentioned. We need to use a framing issue agenda, which is the Sustainable Development Goals. The 2030 agenda, the Sustainable Development Goals, can be a good framework for devising the recovery and also the rebound of our respective areas, because it is not only the economy, but it is all the health, education, social protection, and also because on goal number 16, the issue of rule of law, the human rights, the strong institutions, these are all very important. And also goal number 17, where we talk about partnerships and other things over there. So my, the request to you, please consider SDGs as a good framing approach for your national policies and also for others. My last point is that there are some locked regional issues we now have come to know. I call it locked in issues because you cannot get away from it. South Asian countries cannot get away from it without cooperating among themselves. There are issues which we can solve all by ourselves, but there are issues which we cannot solve if we do not get the cross-border cooperation. What are these issues? Public health is now on the top of the agenda in many ways. Climate action, that is also another way. Pollution cannot be really taken care of without regional cooperation. And migration as well, whether it is legal or it is organized, and migration of various forms, trafficking, both in women and children and other things, and also the spillovers of drug and safety, security, terrorism, and also connectivity, multimodal transport system, and finance and other things are very much necessary. If we do not cooperate on these lines in the future, we will be having suboptimal solutions in our respective national economy. So those are the issues I wanted to bring to you in today's morning. I know that you may have many more lessons, all those. There are many sub-lessons to each of them. Some lessons are more valid for one country than the other. But today morning, I thought I will, either roll out what was in my mind and share it with this very erudite and competent gathering and get some feedback if possible. Thank you very much, Mr. Minister, for staying over. Thank you, North-South University, NASPAA, and also the Jindal School for giving me this unique opportunity to be with you this morning. Thank you.